يريد لبنان ملتقى وفاق عربي.
Sunday, November 27th. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nawfal, and these are today's top stories. On the second day of the General Future Movement Conference, the bloc elects members of its political bureau who decides to increase the number of people eligible to run. Syrian rebels hand in their heavy weapons in a town southwest of Damascus as part of a deal they made with the government for safe passage. And in France, many voters expressing their support for frontrunner François Fillon as they cast their ballots to determine the centre-right candidate for next year's presidential elections. On the second day of the General Future Movement Conference, the bloc is electing members of its political bureau who have decided to increase the number of people eligible to run. This all comes a day after Prime Minister-designate Saad Hariri said that his future movement has emerged victorious after the political settlement that led to the election of President Michel Aoun. Now, this took Lebanon to the shores of safety, he said, under the helm of a national consensus. He added, "Our decision to agree on a political settlement had not aimed and to avoid the regional and local minefields under the helm of a consensus." Hariri said this to cheering crowds during the first day of the Future Movement's second General Conference at Biel. He said that Aoun's election had averted dangers by preserving legitimacy and fending off risks surrounding the country. The PM designate, however, did mention the cabinet formation process that has been stalled by overlapping demands from rival parties. Caretaker Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil is calling for the people of Trinidad and Tobago of Lebanese origin to apply for Lebanese citizenship, according to a statement he issued. He said, "We are here to look out for each one of you because we care about you and we believe that Lebanon cannot be without you." The Foreign Ministry released a statement quoting Bassil as saying during a meeting with representatives of the Lebanese community in the Caribbean nation. During the meeting with his Trinidad and Tobago counterpart, FPM Dennis Moses, Bassil discussed developing bilateral relations. This is the first time a Lebanese foreign minister had visited the dual-island Caribbean nation. But a day earlier, he announced that the Dominican Republic wants to open an embassy in Lebanon during a visit to Santo Domingo. Syrian rebels handed in their heavy weaponry in a town southwest of Damascus as part of a deal they have made with the government to get safe passage to insurgent-controlled areas. Through a series of so-called settlement agreements and army offensives, the Syrian government, backed by Russian air power and Iranian-backed militias, has been steadily suppressing armed opposition to its rule in the capital city's suburbs. Rebels fighting President Bashar al-Assad and his government say the deals are part of a strategy to forcibly displace whole populations from opposition-held areas after years of siege and bombardment. The United Nations estimates 12,000 people have been besieged in Khan al-Sheikh, where a Palestinian refugee camp is located in Damascus. The last month has seen heavy clashes and airstrikes, ending this week with the evacuation deal. And on to the south, where Israeli forces have killed 4 gunmen linked to the Islamic State group after they fired on soldiers, the military said, in the first such attack on the occupied Golan Heights. The Israeli soldiers were targeted with machine gun fire and mortars, and they shot back before the Air Force bombed the vehicle carrying the gunmen, identified as members of the Shahud al-Yarmouk, an ISIS affiliate, according to Lieutenant Peter Lerner. The soldiers from the Golani Brigade were beyond the fence, separating Israeli-occupied Golan Heights from Syria, but on Israeli territory. Now, they noted no one was wounded in the clash, but since the beginning of the internal Syrian conflict, stray fire from government has rebel forces has hit Israel, as have attacks by Lebanon's Hezbollah. Major General Naim Najm al-Jubouri, a top commander in the offensive against Islamic State in the Iraqi city of Mosul, is waging a deeply personal fight after his cousins were seen being killed in an ISIS propaganda video. In June 2015, sorry, there's a little mishap there. Continuing with our regional news, Islamist-dominated opposition groups and their allies secured nearly half of the Kuwaiti parliament seats, official results are showing, raising fears of fresh political wrangling in the oil-rich Gulf state. The opposition and its allies won 24 of the Assembly's 50 seats, the Electoral Authority announced following Saturday's snap election after a dispute of the hiking of petrol prices. The nationalist and liberal opposition contested the election after a 4-year boycott in protest over the government's amendment of the key voting system. Around half of the opposition candidates who won seats are Islamists from a Muslim Brotherhood-linked group and Salafists as well. And on to France, where many voters in Paris are expressing their support for frontrunner François Fillon as they cast their ballots to determine the centre-right candidate for the 2017 presidential elections. As polling stations opened in the second round of the Conservative primaries, many said they believed former Prime Minister François Fillon would be the best place to turn France around. Opinion polls show Fillon, a social conservative with a deep attachment to his Catholic roots, going into the race as the clear favorite after stunning his centrist challenger Alain Juppé with a massive surge in support just before the first November 20th round. Neither rain nor fatigue drained the energy of Cuban Americans in Miami's Little Havana neighborhood, who spent a second night celebrating the death of their arch-enemy Fidel Castro. The dancing and singing continued into early Sunday, well after crowds first spilled into the streets to celebrate as news of the 90-year-old Castro's death in Cuba was announced. Some 2 million Cubans live in the United States, nearly 70% of them in Florida. Of those, the vast majority live in Miami. Fidel Castro may be gone, but his younger brother, Raúl, 85, remains in power as Cuba's president. Cuban-American Florida Senator Marco Rubio called Castro an evil, murderous dictator who inflicted misery and suffering on his own people and turned Cuba into an impoverished island prison. And finally, if you're thinking about Weekend at the Movies, set to top the box office this weekend is sci-fi drama The Movie Arrival, starring Amy Adams as a linguist attempting to decipher and communicate with aliens that have landed on Earth. It also co-stars Jeremy Renner and Forrest Whitaker. Here is the trailer.
There are days that define your story beyond your life, like the day they arrived.
What might be called first contact. The objects measure at least.
I'm Colonel G.T. Weber from Army Intelligence. Pack your bags. You're at the top of everyone's list when it comes to translations. Priority 1. What do they want? Where are they from? You'll be reporting to me, but you'll be working with him when you're in the show. That's what they call him, the UFO.
Who's being carted off in the medevac?
Not everyone is wired for what you're about to do.
So what do they look like?
You'll see soon enough.
Every 18 hours, a door opens up. That's where we go in. It's done. Yeah, that just happened.
What happens now?
They arrive.
They need to see me.
Dr. Banks? Are you insane?
Now that's a proper introduction.
More objects have landed around the world.
This is one of 12. I'm never going to be able to speak their words.
Got 2 days. Figure something out.
I am human. It's their language. We need to make sure that they understand the difference between a weapon and a tool. Language is messy, and sometimes one can be both.
Are you dreaming in their language? It's possible they're prodding us to fight among ourselves.
This is just a way to force us to work together for once.
It's more complicated than that.
How is it more complicated?
Russia just executed one of their own to keep their secret
Got 21 hours.
before they start global war.
So how do we clarify their intentions?
I go back in.
Why does this feel worse?
Arrival is playing in theaters across the country. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our stories. On the second day of the General Future Movement Conference, the bloc elects members of its political bureau who decide to increase the number of people eligible to run. Syrian rebels hand in their heavy weapons in the town southwest of Damascus as part of a deal they have made with the government to get safe passage to insurgent-controlled areas. And voters express optimism and support for frontrunner François Fillon as they cast their ballots to determine the center-right candidate for the 2017 French presidential elections. Those are your Sunday headlines live on Future Television. Have a good week ahead and take care.
نريد لبنان ملتقى وفاق عربي